Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Lagos, and I'm doing this talk today. I previously gave this talk at CircleCityCon earlier this year, and it's more of a management talk rather than an actual technical talk for the most part. So please bear with me, and let's go. What is Agile in the first place? That's the big question that a lot of people have when they start out, and they're told that the company has to move to agile techniques and so on. The Agile Manifesto, yeah, it's not the best. It's aimed squarely at developers and pretty much no one else. So parsing out the information for this, it's a little bit hard. You do have the 12 what are they called? The 12 ideals for Agile online also. They're a little bit better, and this is basically if we can go over this is basically a generalization of these. So first one, welcome change, even later in a project. Projects change. The definition of done changes for various projects. You have to adapt yourself specifically to that, and that's a big issue that a lot of companies are seeing. That you have a project, things change, and you're still working on the project with the definitions for when it was created. Iterate work frequently, anything between a month to a week. Same thing. Iterations. You decide to change things up every month or up to every 2 weeks, every week. The shorter the interval for iteration, the faster you can implement changes to the definition of a project there. Business people and project engineers work together regularly. The business staff, that's where you get your requirements from. You and the engineers have to talk together. That's management and staff have to work together and talk together for this. High trust environment. You accept that your team knows what they're doing. There's at least adequate experience in the team to do the job, and and if not, there should be an adequate documentation for training or identifying how to do the various tasks. That is a given. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a project team is face-to-face conversation. So either in person or via video or voice chat. It's the idea that you have to answer the person immediately. You don't have to sit down and think of the answer via email, and maybe somebody won't actually answer back, or they're busy and they won't respond to you in an hour or a day or a week for this. By face-to-face conversation, it means that you are getting their answers and decisions immediately for this. So you have a quicker throughput of work. Sustainable pace is maintained throughout the project. You don't want overtime. The amount of work that's being done has to be humanly possible for this. You don't want overexerted engineers or analysts for that. You're only going to create problems. Simplicity is key. Don't do the work that doesn't need to be done to complete the project. So find out what is the actual minimal viable product that you want for this. You're implementing a new tool or something? Yeah, great. But do you need to implement all the functionality immediately? You need to get it working first. Then once you have it working first, get it. You can create separate projects to add in functionality or activate functionality for this. You show that the product is working, and that's enough for the start. Best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organized teams. Your team you're the people who you and your team are working on the project. You are working with the tools. You know where the problems are for this. Any solutions or so on there, they can be the team can identify the problems and fix them. And with every iteration, as before, reflect on how to become more effective, tune and adjust behavior accordingly. This is basically the foundation for continuous improvement and continuous development. And once an iteration comes to an end, well, find out what went right, what went wrong, and work off of that for improvements. Origin of Agile. It's actually a lot older than most people would expect. Um, Ideally, based off of documentation, it originates more from the theory of constraints by Goldratt. Any system is limited from achieving more of its goals by a small number of constraints. And by focusing to identify and restructure the organization around them, we limit their impact. Basically, you've got bottlenecks, problems, or that there. Those are stopping you from becoming more efficient and so on there. And that's the trick, and that's what we have to look at getting rid of. And the steps are pretty simple. First, identify the constraints, bottlenecks for that in your processes or staff. Decide how to exploit the constraints. These are quick improvements using whatever resources you already have. Subordinate the work. Review the process and make sure the constraint is actually needed. So you have the constraint there. Do you actually need to do that? Is it a constraint a tool that's causing a problem, or is it a staff member that's hoarding tickets or other work for that? Can you send off some work to another person or use another tool to do the same job? If not, elevate the system's constraints. The constraint's still there. Consider further actions or improvements needed to eliminate it. And this is where you have to go to manager and say, hey, we need to buy this product, or we need to implement this, or we need more people simply for this to get work done. This is the part where all else fails when you try to do everything in your current budget and everything. You need to pull out your wallet. And if the constraint breaks, which is eliminated, go back to step one, because you've eliminated one constraint, you're going to get new ones for this. The theory of constraints basically advocates also keeping an inventory of products low. You don't make new inventory when you can't sell it. And you keep in-work inventory low by using small batches, such as with Agile. This keeping iterations small for this. Time to process an element of inventory is key to finding where the bottlenecks are. How long does something stay at a work position or so there? In this case, how much time does a ticket or a job stay with a person for that? Inventory is anything that requires labor to create or modify. For us, that's tickets and tasks. Going from that, you have the Toyota way, which is pretty famous overall, developed from Six Sigma from Motorola. You have continuous improvement, which is the main core aspect. Long-term vision for a company. This is a mission statement, basically. It has to be reasonable, but in reality, it's a potentially unachievable goal. For example, you state your team will respond to any new indicator of compromise, indicator of attack, or vulnerability that's been published, and implement an alert in production or remediate the vulnerability within an hour, while following standard operating procedure for this. What company has standard operating procedure that actually works in that time frame? Those are areas where you push improvement. Continuous improvement here, Kaizen. Any manager of their worth probably knows this word. And in order to find the solution, you go to the source of the problem for that. You find the source and work from off of that. And with this, you also have respect for people, respect for others, take responsibility to do your best to build a mutual trust with the team. Managers have to listen to team members listen to the managers. It's a two-way street in this case. Stimulate personal and professional growth, share opportunities of development and maximize individual and team performance. Learning. Give out opportunities for staff to learn and improve their work and their techniques. Continuing there, you need to find the right process. Creating a process that can bring problems to the surface. You find issues, and you work on them. For tickets or so on there, use a pull system to avoid overproduction. You don't want to overload people for too many tickets that they can't resolve, or there's a lack of documentation to actually resolve them. Level out the workload. Same thing. Don't overload the workers. Build a culture where it's okay to stop a process in order to fix it when problems are identified. You have a staff member that sees a problem in your processes. They can say, hey, we have a problem. We are missing documentation, or we're missing something in our work that that it's causing us problems. Okay, stop the sprint and hold a meeting to identify where the problem is and how much does it affect the team or the organization. Standardize tasks and processes. Documentation. You need to have everything documented for processes, so you know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And new people can learn how to do these tasks quickly and get up to speed. Use already tested technology. Don't reinvent the wheel. This is basically if you're trying to save money and by duplicating a service or functionality by having another team redevelop the same functionality when you can buy it. Often you could buy the functionality for products like ServiceNow. Sure, they're more expensive, but what you get is not just one single functionality added to a product. You get tons of different functionalities included in a single product. For this, it can help you out with the performance for your team. Add value to the organization. Grow leaders who understand the work, live by the continuous improvement philosophy, and teach it to others. So everybody's looking for improvement, especially management. Develop people and teams who follow this philosophy. Everybody who's looking to improve their work or their skills, help them out. Everybody who's looking for ways to improve the processes, help them out and let them be heard. And same thing, work with partners and suppliers. You find a product that doesn't work, well, contact them. Or you want certain functionality added in, contact them. Create either a bug report for them, or a request for a function or a feature for this. Continuously solve core problems drives organizational learning. If there's a problem, go see what's going on. Try to do the task or yourself. For example, if it's an incident or so on there, why can't somebody do it? If you can't do it, well, find out. You'll see why for this. Make decisions by consensus, considering all options, and then implementing the solution quickly. Talk with your team. They're the ones who are on the ground and doing the work. Get their opinions on how to solve these problems and get the solutions rolling quickly. And become a learning organization through reflection and continuous learning. See what went wrong, how it was fixed, and how it can be improved in the future. It's essentially basically project management, but without project managers to a certain point. Every plan fails when confronted with the enemy. Well-known saying for this, and in this case, waterfall is one of the best examples for this. The further you plan out work, the more of a chance unexpected work or circumstances will wreck your schedule. Same thing. Increasing flexibility means breaking up work into smaller, more manageable chunks. If you're working on a large piece of a project, it's going to take you time. You cannot deviate your time or effort off of that. As a result, you are holding up work either for the team or not doing other work that can be done. Break the workload down to smaller chunks, and work off of that. And iteration. Make sure that the iterations are based off of chunk size. You're doing sprints of 1 month. Okay, so the size of the tasks is going to be something that will take roughly a month to do, depending on how many tasks you have there. Ideally, you should be moving into quicker sprints or eliminating them completely and just doing the work normally for this. Work with the team leads and management to decide how to subdivide the tasks and work for that quick manner, and have them understand how to do this. Then with Agile, you've got the frameworks. Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban. Yeah, they're every company tries to implement something like this at one time or another, and as we all know, often enough, it just doesn't work. It doesn't take, or for some reason, nobody actually likes having more meetings overall for this. But there is a trick to actually decide which ones you're going to be doing and when. So Scrum, smaller teams, 3 to 9 people. Team roles, ideally, everybody has their own specific role. So work is handed off from one person to another for that, or project tasks are dedicated people for that. Work cycles, 1 to 4 weeks. Rules, you have strict rules. For example, you can't add in new tasks while new work while the sprint has already started there. You can decide to cancel a sprint, but that's a big thing for this. You follow the rules. And task assignments, they're assigned to the actual team members. So your team leads can assign the work to your staff for this, based off of what needs to be done and so on. And the limits for amount of work there, it's just based on how big of a sprint you have for this, and how small the actual tasks you create are. Scrum Ban, just Scrum eliminating some of the structure for that. No specific limitations for a number of team members, so you can have as large a team as you want. There's no specific roles for this. 2-week iterations usually for this with continuity. So tasks still remain there. They can spill over easily for this. Find the middle ground. For rules, it's more flexible. It's as the name goes, it's a middle ground between Scrum and Kanban. In this case, the members choose tasks that they're doing in the work from the backlog. And you only have a limit on how much work is being done at a certain moment by any team member. They're not doing 5 or 6 tasks. They're doing maybe 1 or 2 for this. And Kanban, basically that eliminates the team roles completely also. No specific limitation for team members. Continuous workflow. There's no sprints. You're just taking work as it's in the backlog and how important it is based off of prioritization. Rules, yeah, relaxed, flexible. You know that you have to take work you have to choose the work that you're doing, and you just choose it and do it. The tasks are ideally smaller in size, so they can be done quicker. Limits placed on in work in progress. Same thing. You don't overload yourself or your team with too much work at the same time. The Scrum meetings, yeah, still you've got the structure and it's a pain, but these are the usual meetings that usually happen for this. Sprint planning, first day of the sprint, attendees, basically everybody. Product owner, Scrum Master, Scrum team. Product owner could be your manager in this case. Potentially an hour, it depends really on the team size. And objectives, you set a sprint goal. What work needs to be done during the sprint? Daily Scrum, held every morning ideally. That's with the Scrum Master and the Scrum team. In this case, you can do it with your team lead and your team. You don't need a Scrum Master per se for this. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes for this. And these are the questions you ask. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Any blockers or any issues that you need help with? This is a status meeting. You say what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and what's stopping you potentially from doing that work. Simple enough. As a team lead or Scrum Master, they're supposed to elevate the problems and help to eliminate the blockers or issues. Sprint review. They're at the end of the sprint. Same thing with everybody for this. Scrum team, product owner, Scrum Master, manager, team lead, Scrum Master, and the team. Takes 2 to 4 hours. Ideally, in development, you demo the work that you've done. You show what you've done. You identify user stories that have been active, and you basically just see, do you need to put them into backlog if they're not finished, or do you want to spill them over to next week? And you also take a look at the backlog. Do we need to all these tasks either way? Have things changed? Sprint retrospective. This is basically between the review and planning meetings. Same thing with everybody for this. Takes about an hour. This is basically a retrospective on how well was the work done. Was the sprint good? Were there a lot of incidents that brought you away from your project work? What didn't go as planned? What failed for this? How you can implement improvements. Backlog refinement. Same thing. Here in this case, it happens every other week. depending on the duration of the sprint. Entire team again. There's no specific duration. They could be longer or shorter. In this case, you just define what are the backlog items and which ones are the most important that you need to do at a single moment. Align the backlogs to your KPIs for this, and appropriate sizing of backlog items. Don't have them too big, don't have them too small. Just make sure that they don't take too much time. And if you need to, add more detail to actual backlog items to say what the work that actually needs to be done. So how do you implement the frameworks? Which one do you decide they're doing with your team? Scrum, and Kanban. Well, you don't need to actually implement the specific frameworks. You can do whatever you want. But if you follow the stages of team development, it can actually help you see which ones you're doing and how much structure you actually need. So in the initial stages, when a team is created, you got the forming and storing stage. So forming, you've got the team that's implemented, and everybody's trying to get to know each other. Storming, who has what skills, and everybody's trying to show off or show what they can do in this case. At this point, you need a little bit more structure in a team to actually get work done and organize things. Yeah, same thing here with Scrum Ban for this. At this point, your team is way more set up, and they know who's doing what are the roles, what are the tools, and everything there. You're starting to actually improve your speeds and everything there. So you just eliminate some of the structure for this, and you've got productivity, which is stabilizing in your team. Then when you've got to a stage where you're performing, you're a mature team. You know what you're doing. Everybody has access to the tools. They have knowledge on how to use the tools, and there's good documentation overall. Go to Kanban, eliminate the structure, even more structure for this. Make sure that everybody's free to do their jobs as they need to for this, so they don't either overload themselves or overload other people in the team for this. And what happens if your team changes or something? There's new people coming in or new people leaving. Well, add in a little bit of structure. You don't need to go completely to the start there, but add in some structure. You have new people coming in or people leaving, but you still have the core team. Go back to Scrum Ban. Add more structure whenever you need it. There's a really good blog called the Pragmatic Engineer, and he wrote a really good article on how companies in Silicon Valley are doing Agile, but they're not actually using any of these frameworks. And this is it. The general idea for that framework is if your team knows what they're doing and you've got and they know the tools and everything there, they could just pick and choose and get the work done either way. There doesn't need to be all these formalities for work like in Scrum or so on there. And like I said, it's not simply implementing a framework. So you got a company that says that you need to do Scrum or Kanban across the board. Yeah, that's not going to work for that. Every team is different. Every organization is different. Business requirements are changed from team to team. It's not a one size fits all implementation. Frameworks you can implement it partially or a hybrid manner, like Scrum Ban, as I said. But the implementation is a two-way street. Organizations themselves have to change to give project managers, product owners, team leads, management also, more liberty to initiate and lead changes within a team. And same thing is, team members have to speak up and identify problems or constraints to their management. Both sides have to speak to each other and listen to each other. And we get to the point where all this ends up, it's DevOps. So it's basically the culmination of Agile in the development world. We really don't see this much from our point of view in security operations until we start doing DevSecOps or working with the development team. So, as I said, the end state of Agile, it could be called DevOps. It technically is. It's the same foundations between the same foundations and principles between are shared, basically. And the thing is, though, DevOps does define objectives regarding the type of work and the techniques used to achieve them. For this, it's an expansion of Agile for this. It expects good knowledge of what the team members are doing and creating implementing tools that can implement these changes frequently. You want this is basically process work or using or buying or creating tools to actually make your team work faster for this. And some of these areas is like the software development lifecycle, which is a really good tool, which I'll show for SIM management. In DevOps, from Gene Kim's work on the Phoenix Project, the DevOps Handbook, he defines 4 types of work in a business, basically. Main type of work, business projects. They're the highest priority. They're business initiatives, and most of the development and engineering work goes to them. They're there to make money for this, or not to lose money. Internal IT projects. This is basically with your own team projects for this. Infrastructure, IT operations. These are projects to improve your systems, replace tools or similar for that. That's your security engineering work overall that happens. And updates, changes, these are actually generated from the 2 types of work. So you've got the schedule changes and updates to systems, patching and so on for that there. These things happen from internal and business projects for this. But then you've got unplanned work and recovery work. DevOps says you should limit this as much as possible. And those are incidents, problems generated by other work for this. In this case, incidents. It's often enough the core of our work for this. And we're supposed to limit this as much as possible? Well, it depends. With DevOps, you also have the 3 ways of work for this. So first off, systems thinking, flow of work. How work is actually handled in your organization. It flows one way, basically. From let's say from a Kanban board, it goes from new to in progress to in review to done. For this, it goes only one way. There should not be any backflow in the process, which means you've found some unidentified issues and constraints that are causing you problems, and those issues need to be fixed. For this, amplify feedback loops. When you're doing this, see what went wrong, what went right, and try to push improvements in your systems, either technology-wise or process-wise, or maybe finding out that your team needs more training on certain aspects. Third of all, experimentation. Try different solutions for the same problem for this. This is basically A/B testing in development or user experience testing for this. See which one works better for the solution. There's no right way or wrong way to do anything in this case. You can see which one's more efficient, basically, for out of your decisions. As I said, with incidents, there is a difference, mainly between enterprise environments and MSSPs. Enterprise team projects usually take priority in enterprise environments. Maintenance and operations work, tasks for other teams, so the team asking you to install AV or something on another computer, installation of software, etc. They're all within the team project's priority for this. Incidents take engineers away from improvements that should be limited. Ideally, in this case, for an enterprise environment, you're looking at 80% project operations work and really 20% incident work. So you're looking at SOC level 3 incidents, so they're getting handed up to you, ideally. And this is at a point where you have to decide how much time you're dedicating for that. Because the main goal for an enterprise team, you're either there to make money for the organization or limit the loss of money. In this case, since a lot of IT security is a cost center for organizations. In this case, automate incidents and operations to meet KPIs and team SLAs. That's the best solution for this. You create automations wherever you can. Either partially automate incidents or fully automate them if you can. For MSSPs, you've got a little bit different aspects there. Maintenance operations work can be handled by a separate team compared to security. So you might be just the analyst, level 1 or level 2 SOC analyst there. You're not doing anything maintenance or operations work usually. Incidents are the main work done. So you've got the 80% of incident work and 20% identifying improvements. How can you make your work go faster? Is there documentation for the incidents that you're doing there? That's all you care for. Either doing the actual incident work and making it go faster and seeing where are the problems in your processes. And for automation, that's more based off of what contracts you have with the organizations for that. They might say, hey, we want people actually looking at these alerts. Or, hey, yeah, if you can automate it. That's all dependent on contracts there. So you might use automation to meet your KPIs and SLAs, but sometimes you might not. At that point, those are process improvements and team improvements for that are the only way you can do things. So starting to change to Agile. It's people, process, and tools. Change has to come from the top, senior management, and within the team themselves. Everybody has to be on the same board for the work. You can't say just the team lead, the management is saying you're doing Agile, and then there's no input or work with the actual teams to implement this, or vice versa, having management say you're doing Agile now and telling the teams to organize themselves without actual involvement of team leads or management in any way to actually push or make sure that the process is actually being done well. And generally in this case, the first step, identify all the processes that your team is involved with. What are the tasks you receive from other teams? What are the incidents your team have defined and how to resolve them? Common operations that are done frequently. This is your basic work for they do day to day. You have to have them defined, all the processes identified, what tools are needed for this. Here, playbooks, they're your friend. Use Word, SharePoint, OneNote, or a wiki. Any of these are fine. But ideally, have actual playbooks are within your ticketing system, such as the SecOps module in ServiceNow. They're preferred because they force analysts to follow a specific workflow for each incident there. So what it does, it ensures repeatability. Every step will be taken, and you can see where are the areas that need improvement in the actual process that way. If you're going off of just annotated workbook playbooks for that, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to be following all the steps correctly or at all. But basically, these in the end create the actual foundations for automating the incident response process. And SOAR, security orchestration and automation for this. Yeah. Automation helps you out for this because it'll increase the throughput of the work of your team. How much work is actually being done? By simply actually freeing time up for your staff there to work on other stuff. And for change management. Yeah. We know ITIL and so on there for technical stuff there, but how do you actually change the process or everything within an organization or within a team to actually accept these changes to move to Agile? Well, there's some models out there. They're primarily either process-focused or people-focused. Process-focused ones like Cotter's 8-step change model, Lewin's change model, Deming's cycle PDCA, and McKinsey 7S model. Those look at your processes and where you need to improve, how to fix them, how to change them for this. But the thing is, they're concentrating only on that, on where you need to improve in your processes. We've got the problem where you have human factors involved. Your staff might not like the changes. They might be actively hostile to the changes for this. So you've got to work on your people skills in this case to move them to the point that they accept the changes and work and understand that they also have a voice in implementing these things. And these are the models for ADKAR, the model of change, nudge theory, Saturday change model, Bridges transition model, the Kubler-Ross change curve, Maurer 3 levels of resistance and change model. The last one is basically, I don't like this. I'm unhappy, and I don't like you. So it basically, it's at this point, it's more psychological. How do you get people to accept these changes there and actually work with you to implement these? And they have a lot of similarities to the steps of the five or seven, I think, steps of grief for that. These are just normal ways to accept change in an organization, and ideally you can mix and match these on how to use them with your team, and you don't necessarily need to be locked on one. If you find that one of these doesn't really work for you in a sprint or in an iteration, try another. There's so many of them, and there's so many resources online for these. You can try them out however you want to. Maybe if one doesn't stick, try another. And like I said, you're going from process to pipeline. Knowing your team's work processes is foundational, since it's literally understanding what work is done and how it's done for this. So you start off there. Interactive playbooks are first step to standardize work. You create the initial repeatability. You identify dependencies, where other teams are needed, and constraints. Certain tasks always fall into a single team member. You've got a person that's an expert in networking for this. Great. But any alerts for network-related stuff, they're all going to him. That person is overloaded with work, and it might be, they might be doing it really well, but you have the problem where all the tasks are falling to a single person for this, and it might end up slowing your team down and not allowing you to implement better procedures. So there, what if that person leaves? You're up a creek without a paddle at that point. Implement improvements. Automate the parts of playbooks. You don't need to automate the entire thing, just parts of it for this. Request that other teams automate some parts of their work that's related to your own teams. You need to ask the team to purge emails for that. Can that be automated? Can that be done through a simplified request through a ticket there? That's automatically done. And same thing, offload the excessive work from affected team members. Don't overload single people with work for that. And here, if incident response to alerts has been fully automated, then you're not seeing what's going on. You create new alerts based on frequency of the ones you automated. So find the ideas, find discrepancies to normal daily flow, like for DDoS attacks, for packet flow, and so there. In this case, machine learning can actually be helpful in identifying things that stick out from the pattern. And same thing, new services, products, and technologies are implemented regularly. You've got you take in a new SIM, you take in a new endpoint protection platform. Well, go back to step one and redo the work for that product or platform. One of the great tools that was developed is the software development lifecycle, in this case for DevOps. It covers the various aspects of how products are built, basically for that. So the phases before planning and planning a product. What are the features they want? Analysis. What features are actually needed? Design. How are you going to build it out? What are the tools you're going to be using? Implementation. Writing out the code. Testing, integration. Make sure that the product works. That it works ideally with the platforms that you're trying to run it on. And maintenance. You find bugs, you find vulnerabilities, patch them and fix them. It's a good process overall for this, and it's basically a super simplified version of the secure software development lifecycle for this, which adds in additional security measures to the various stages. But in this case, all we need is the actual simplified version here. So we can re-implement this as the SIM development lifecycle. Let's adapt it to development techniques to SecOps. So step 1, you've got planning. Identify the IOC, IOA, indicator of compromise, indicator of attack that you want to create an alert for. You've got news that, hey, we've got this thing that we need to take a look at. Great, that's planning. Step 1. What do you actually want to find? Analysis. How can you actually identify this IOC or IOA? Can you actually see it in your environment? It might be a vulnerability for a certain Linux box that, well, turns out it's not actually in your environment, so you don't even need to do an alert specifically for that there, since it doesn't affect you. Design. Create a query to search for IOCs, IOAs in your current system. Have you already seen it? You've got logs in your SIM, and can you find these IOCs anywhere in it there on your EDR software and logs from that? It hasn't seen any of these things there. It's just the basic information. Have you seen it? Can you write a query that actually finds these things? Implementation. This is the part where you transfer the query into actual alert logic for this, and you commit it to production in the SIM so that alerts are actually generated for this. But in this case, you start with, you don't keep it in production technically. It's in testing and integration. So you find out, does the alert actually fire that you created? Ideally, the tickets, while it's in testing, should be assigned to you, the person who created this alert. Why? Because you have the most experience on defining the actual what you're actually looking for. What is the severity of what needs to be identified for this? In this case, has it fired? Yes. Great. Tune the alert as needed for this. Maybe you could set the alert off to create a ticket for you based off frequency and not just for every instance. If you haven't seen it, well, verify why it's not firing, for example. Maybe the actual IOC or IOA is not present on your system, or maybe you're not logging it for some reason, or there aren't any logs from that single product even for that overall. Find the reason. And ideally, assign a purple team member if you have someone for this to write a test article on a dedicated machine to confirm that the alert will actually fire. So you're not waiting for someone to actually actively attack you to see if your alert fires. You're not gonna go, hey, the alert I created 9 months ago is firing, and just now it works. Yeah, but you didn't know for 9 months if the alert actually worked. So it's not in production or anything for that there. And here's the key factor for this. From step 3 to through step 5 for this, you are also responsible for one major thing: documentation. That is, what tools are needed to actually resolve the alert, where you need to go to actually identify the information to resolve the alert, and the steps you need to take to actually resolve it, and find out what are the conditions for a true positive or a false positive for the alert. All these things have to be documented in your work for this to say the product is in production. In this case, a rule. You have the rule that's in production, that's been tested. You know it will fire whenever it sees the IOC or IOA for that, due to either already seeing it or through Purple Team. And you have the documentation on how to solve it there. So anybody who gets this ticket then can go into your library or have an automation or playbook in your ticketing system to actually go through each of the steps one by one. So these things, so people can say, hey, I've never seen this before, but we have documentation on how to resolve this. And maintenance. So how do you do maintenance on alerts? Well, fire drills. Every 6 months, make sure that every alert that you have there that has a Purple Team test article, fire it off. Make sure you can still detect them. Maybe something changed in the log formats or something there that broke your logic there. This is how you make sure that the alerts are still working. Ticket metrics. Another problem for management. How do you prove your team's work in this case? Number of tickets closed. Yeah, it's a stupid metric. It doesn't take into consideration the effort or the result, true positive or false positive of a ticket. You can automatically assign tickets to users randomly. Yeah, it's good, but you can't count how many tickets are closed to measure how performance there. They're assigned to everybody randomly. But you don't know how hard these tickets are, how much people are working there. So you've got non-standard results for this. Pick and pull discretion works in not overburdening staff. Sure, you're not going to be overloaded there, but you've got a problem where employees with more experience, well, they can identify potentially easy tickets and just hoard them. So you've got the people with most experience doing the most tickets, which are also the simplest to actually do. So you'll have people with less experience. Yeah, how can you get around that there and make sure that those people are not overloaded with the difficult work? So you can assign a points value based on the priority criticality for that. So 1,000 points for a critical ticket over 1 point for a low criticality ticket there. But you can't really control the frequency of these tickets there. And staff can actually game the system by taking points tickets that have higher point values to up their results. Scrum has another tool. It's called Planning Poker there. So it basically assigns a weight for a task based on the amount or difficulty of the work to complete it. The thing is, though, for security in this case, the weight is assigned not at the start of the ticket or when it's created, but when it's actually closed based on the closure type for this, true positive or false positive. And Planning Poker is actually pretty simple. It's for this. It's usually done during backlog refinement. Values are decided on how much work a task takes and never how much time it would for this. It's just the amount of work. We're more visually oriented. So we can estimate things better based off size or quantity for this, and not actual time for this. How many people are routinely late or so on there? So estimating time for that doesn't work. Plus, if you're doing it within a team for this, you have the wisdom of the crowds to help you assign how difficult the task is for this. And for the values, the general consensus is using a modified Fibonacci sequence to estimate the work. So 0, it's already done. 1, a simple task should take a few minutes, ideally. 2, 3, 5, 8, and going up there. The more effort it takes, the more complex a task it takes. The thing is, though, you do not consider SLAs or KPIs for these. Those are tracked separately and adjacent to the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then to help us out on identifying problems in our system, in our teams, we use the law of averages for the tickets. They're ranked by the system. And ideally also, your team changes, you have to consider refactoring these values there. Maybe one or so types of incidents are taking a lot less time than you expect. Well, good. You might give them a lower value for this. It should be done, these refactorings should be done regularly to make sure that there's a good idea on how much work everything takes overall. Like I said, law of averages. Well, here's a quick review. The mean and sigma, standard deviation and normal and the mean for this here. So the average time in this case, take a task that has a certain score like 3, find the average time it takes for this. Ideally, it should give you a good estimation of how much work is actually being done. How long does it take for this? At standard deviation, you find the tickets are actually out of the normal range for this. Which ones are causing problems? So out of bounds tickets, when they exceed, let's say, standard deviation, both in positive and negative standard deviation. Let's see, when tickets take more time, So over one or more standard deviations that outside of the norm for that. These tasks that just take way more time than expected for this level. Well, find out why. Dependencies can be to blame. Team members are waiting for other teams to complete the associated work. Or your team members just don't know how to do that. There's not enough documentation, or you need training for this. Or there's potentially a problem with the tool for this. And generally speaking, for these are the easy, the low-hanging fruit that you can target to fix problems for this and improve your SLAs by either automation or fixing your processes. These using this, you find literally the low-hanging fruit for instances that take too much time and give you targets to work on to direct your improvements. But what happens if they take less time? Well, you've got a solution where an employee may have found a way to automate their work. Hey, great, congratulate them, and see about standardizing their procedure if you can. They save time, and if everybody can you can save more time for everybody there. Hey, that means better efficiency for your entire team, not just for that one person. Or you've got a problem where an employee isn't actually doing the work or just partially doing it. You might need to retrain them, closer monitor the employee's work, or push comes to shove, terminate them. But here's another thing: track the averages for work, for time poker estimation of effort there. Even if they're not linked to KPIs or SLAs, you can get a lot of good information from this. So, for example, as a team evolves during the forming, storming, norming, performing phases, the average time it takes for the work should actually drop month to month. So it should see an improvement for this regularly. And this should include performance improvements done with automations and improvements done in conjunction with other teams for this. In this case, time saved equals money saved. You can do more tickets in less time means improved efficiency. This allows you as managers to offer a metric of money saved over time to senior leaders in an organization. We can't say how much we saved money, how much money we saved because we weren't hit by ransomware. But hey, we can say we saved X amount of dollars by creating improvements, so we are so much more efficient in our tasks, and by being able to process more and more tasks and work at a single time. And the thing is, when your team changes the components or the staff there, these averages will increase. So you could track the time they take to start decreasing again, to see how well your team is working together for this, and how well your improvements are done. Going off of this, there's always the benefits of actually finding useful study materials. So you've got the foundational texts for Agile and DevOps there. The Goal, A Process of Ongoing Improvement by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt, a really foundational book for this. Toyota Kata by Mark Rother, foundation also to identify how Toyota does their work and how continuous improvement is actually implemented in Toyota. And of course, Gene Kim's work, The Phoenix Project, which is a take on the Goal, but for DevOps and IT work for this, and the DevOps Handbook, covering the tasks and techniques used for operational, for general development and operations work for this. But also, personally, for me, I would suggest also reading the book Creativity, Inc., Overcoming Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration by Ed Catmull. It's a book on how Pixar was founded. And if you've read these 4 books before, you'll see a lot of the same stuff from those books coming over in Ed Catmull's work for this, on how Pixar was done, how they actually implemented improvements to their teams for this. And since security is also a creative enterprise, we have to think of how to solve problems and implement solutions. It could be a helpful point of view on how other companies that are not technically solely development oriented actually did that. So certifications, are they actually useful, or or anything there? If you need to show management that you know something about this, well, Scrum. Scrum certs are good if you're assigned the task of being a Scrum Master. At least you can say you have the credentials to do that. There's generally 2 of these considered. The Professional Scrum Master by scrum.org. You do not need to take a class. There's a higher minimal score to pass, about 85%, but it's open book. And generally, Scrum.org pushes for more understanding on how to use Scrum and adapt it to your requirements. Then there's the Certified Scrum Master by Scrum Alliance. Requires you to take a class. You have to do it. But the passing score is 65% only. And the exam concentrates more on rote knowledge of Scrum and not on how to apply or adapt it. Agile, yeah, anything by PMI is good. If you can't afford the PMP, CompTIA Project Plus or CAPM by PMI. And finally, thank you. Sorry for making it so long for this, but there's a lot of information and everything there. And questions, comments, or anything there? If anyone wants to add in?